The twin sons of Ashara Prime beat down mercilessly as Marcus Hale crested another dune, his boots sinking into sand that shimmered like crushed diamonds. 3 weeks of walking through this wasteland had stripped away everything but the essentials. His tactical vest, a half-empty water recycler, and the stubborn refusal to lie down and die that had kept him alive through worse hells than this. He paused at the ridge, squinting through the heat haze at the cluster of structures rising from the desert floor. The settlement was smaller than he'd hoped, maybe 40 buildings scattered like dice across the orange sand. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, a promising sign of habitation. Marcus adjusted the pack, cutting into his shoulders, and started down the slope. The settlement's edge was marked by rusted sensor posts and a weathered sign in 3 languages, one of them Terran Standard. Haven's Rest. Marcus almost laughed at the irony. He'd been searching for rest for 2 years now, ever since the military had thanked him for his service and shown him the door with a dishonorable discharge weighing around his neck like an anchor. He moved between the buildings, noting the mix of prefab units and structures built from local stone. Most showed signs of neglect, windows dark and doors sealed. The few residents he spotted watched him with the wariness of frontier folk who'd learned that strangers often brought trouble. One dwelling stood apart from the others, set back against a rocky outcrop. Unlike its neighbors, this building looked maintained. Reinforced walls, a small garden plot showing signs of careful tending, solar panels angled to catch maximum light. Marcus felt himself drawn toward it, though whether by instinct or simple exhaustion, he couldn't say. He was 10 meters from the door when it swung open. The weapon came first. A sleek energy rifle he didn't recognize, followed by the woman holding it. Marcus froze, hands instinctively rising to shoulder height. She was unlike anyone he'd encountered in his travels. Her skin was a deep cerulean blue, almost luminescent in the harsh sunlight. White hair fell past her shoulders in a straight cascade, framing features that were humanoid but distinctly alien. High cheekbones, slightly larger eyes than a human's, colored a striking violet gray. She wore a form-fitting black bodysuit that spoke of military practicality rather than fashion. "State your business, human," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality despite its hard edge. The weapon never wavered. Marcus kept his hands visible. "Looking for work. Food, water, maybe a place to sleep that isn't sand. I can pay my way?" Those violet eyes studied him with an intensity that made Marcus feel transparent. He'd been evaluated before by drill sergeants and enemy soldiers alike, but this felt different. "More personal. Work," she repeated, lowering the rifle slightly. "What skills do you offer?" "Security mostly. Combat training, tactical assessment, basic engineering. I've done construction, maintenance, whatever needs doing." He met her gaze steadily. "I'm not picky. How long do you plan to stay?" "As long as the work lasts. I move when the money runs out." Something shifted in her expression, calculation replacing suspicion. She lowered the weapon entirely, though Marcus noticed she kept it within easy reach. "I don't need temporary labor, human. I need something more permanent." "I don't do permanent," Marcus said reflexively. "You might reconsider when you hear my offer." She stepped aside, revealing the interior of her home. "My name is Vera. Come inside." "We should discuss this properly." Marcus hesitated. Every survival instinct he'd honed over 15 years of military service screamed that this was a bad idea. Strange planet, unknown species, a woman with a rifle and an agenda. He should thank her politely and move on to the settlement proper. But exhaustion weighed heavy in his bones, and something in Vera's eyes held a familiar pain. The kind that came from loss. He recognized it, because he saw it in his own reflection every morning. "Marcus Hale," he said, accepting the unspoken invitation. The interior was sparse, but organized with military precision. A small living area opened into a kitchen. Weapons were mounted on the walls, not for decoration, but for quick access. A child's drawing was pinned near the kitchen entrance, a splash of color in the otherwise utilitarian space. "Sit," Vera commanded, gesturing to a chair at a simple metal table. She moved to a cabinet, retrieving 2 glasses and a bottle of amber liquid. "You'll want a drink for this conversation." Marcus sat, watching as she poured generous measures. She slid one glass across to him before settling into the opposite chair. Up close, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her free hand rested near a blade sheathed at her hip. "You said you need something permanent," Marcus prompted. "What exactly?" Vera took a measured sip of her drink before responding. "My husband died 6 months ago. Military action in the Outer Rim. My son Nico needs guidance I cannot provide alone." She leaned forward, her gaze locked on his. "I don't need a worker, Marcus Hale. I need a father for my child. Someone who can teach him to survive. Someone who can help him become strong enough to face what's coming." Marcus nearly choked on his drink. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious." Vera's expression remained unchanged. "Before you refuse, consider. You're wandering aimlessly across hostile terrain with no destination. I'm offering shelter, purpose, and compensation. All I ask is that you stay long enough to train my son. Teach him what a warrior needs to know." "I'm not father material," Marcus said, the words tasting bitter. "I'm barely person material these days, yet here you are, still moving forward." Vera's voice softened slightly. "That's what I need for Nico. Someone who understands that survival isn't about winning. It's about refusing to quit." Before Marcus could formulate a response, a small figure appeared in the doorway leading to the back rooms. A boy no more than 8 by human standards, with his mother's blue skin and white hair. His violet eyes were wide, taking in the strange humans sitting at their table. "Mom?" The boy's voice was hesitant. "Is he staying?" Vera's expression transformed as she looked at her son, hardness melting into warmth. "That depends, Nico. Go wash up for dinner. We'll talk after." The boy lingered a moment longer, studying Marcus with unconcealed curiosity before disappearing back into the other room. In that brief moment, Marcus saw something that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. Hope mixed with fear, the look of a child trying to be brave while his world remained shattered. Vera turned back to Marcus. "My husband promised Nico he would teach him everything. How to fight, how to think, how to be strong. Then the war took him, and those promises died with him." She finished her drink in one swallow. "I can teach Nico combat. I can teach him survival. But there are things a boy needs to learn from a man, especially when that boy carries the weight of his father's death and dreams of revenge." "Revenge," Marcus repeated, a chill running through him. "Against who?" "The Kryn Collective. They ambushed my husband's unit. Left no survivors." Vera's knuckles whitened around her empty glass. One day Nico will be strong enough to make them answer for that. But first, he needs to learn. And I need help giving him that chance. Marcus sat back, his mind racing. This was insane. He'd come looking for a few days of honest work, maybe enough to fund passage off this rock. Now he was being asked to become a surrogate father to an alien child who wanted to grow up to be an Avenger. Everything logical told him to refuse, to walk away, to keep running as he'd been running for 2 years. But as the last rays of the twin suns painted the room in shades of amber and gold, Marcus found himself thinking about that boy's eyes, about the way Vera's voice had softened when she spoke to her son, about the fact that he'd been drifting without purpose since his discharge, and here was someone offering him something he'd thought lost forever, a reason to stay, a reason to matter. "How long?" he heard himself ask. Vera's eyes brightened with something that might have been relief. 6 months. Stay 6 months, train Nico, and I'll pay you enough to start fresh anywhere in the sector. She paused. "Or if you find you want to stay longer, we can renegotiate." Marcus reached for his glass, draining the contents. The liquid burned pleasantly down his throat, warming him from the inside. 6 months, he agreed. "But I need to be clear, I'm not replacing anyone. I'm a teacher, nothing more." "Agreed," Vera said, though a knowing smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Welcome to Haven's Rest, Marcus Hale. Welcome to our home." As if to seal the bargain, Nico reappeared, cleaner and clearly excited. "Are you really staying?" he asked Marcus directly. "Mom said you might teach me human combat techniques." Marcus glanced at Vera, who simply nodded. He looked back at the boy and found himself smiling despite everything. "I suppose I am. You ready to work hard?" Nico's answering grin was bright enough to rival the sun setting beyond the windows. "I'm ready." Marcus Hale, former soldier, wanderer, and broken man, had set out that morning expecting another day of aimless travel. Instead, he'd found something he hadn't been looking for and certainly didn't deserve. He'd found a family that needed him. Whether he was ready for that or not, only time would tell. The first week passed in a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Marcus woke each morning before the twin suns crested the horizon, preparing a simple breakfast while the house still slept. Nico would appear shortly after, eager and bright-eyed despite the early hour, peppering Marcus with questions about Earth, about human fighting styles, about everything and nothing. "Why do humans only have one heart?" Nico asked on the fifth morning, watching Marcus flip something resembling pancakes on the thermal griddle. "One's enough if you take care of it," Marcus replied, sliding the food onto a plate. "Your people have two?" "Yes. Mom says it makes us harder to kill." The boy spoke with the casual matter-of-factness of a child who'd grown up understanding mortality too early. "Dad used to say his hearts beat in rhythm. One for duty, one for family." Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his chest. "Your father sounds like he was a good man." "The best." Nico's voice carried absolute conviction. "When I'm older, I'm going to make the Kryn pay for taking him away." Before Marcus could formulate a response about revenge and its costs, Vera emerged from her room. She wore training clothes this morning, her white hair pulled back in a practical braid. Even in the simple outfit, she moved with a grace that Marcus found increasingly distracting. "Ready for today's lesson?" she asked Nico, but her eyes were on Marcus. There was something in that gaze, an awareness that had grown over the past days. They'd been circling each other cautiously, like two predators uncertain whether they were allies or competition. "Always ready," Nico declared, already heading for the training yard behind the house. After the boy left, Vera poured herself a cup of the bitter local tea she favored. "He talks about his father more now," she said quietly. "With you here. Is that good or bad?" "Good. He'd been keeping it locked inside." She moved closer, close enough that Marcus caught the scent of her, something like cinnamon and ozone. "Thank you for that." "I'm just answering his questions." "You're doing more than that." Vera's hand briefly touched his arm, her skin cool against his warmth. The contact lasted only a moment, but it left Marcus acutely aware of her proximity. "You're showing him that men can be strong without being hard. That's something I couldn't teach." Their eyes met, and Marcus saw beyond the warrior's exterior to the woman beneath, lonely, grieving, but not broken, fighting to give her son a future while carrying the weight of her past. "Vera, he started. But she was already pulling away. "We should join Nico. He gets impatient when we make him wait." The training sessions became the backbone of their days. Marcus taught Nico human close-quarters combat, emphasizing leverage and momentum over raw strength. The boy was a quick learner, his Sarath physiology giving him advantages in speed and endurance that offset his smaller size. "Your opponent expects you to retreat," Marcus explained, demonstrating a defensive sequence. "Instead, you move inside their guard. Use their size against them." Nico mimicked the movement, his form nearly perfect. Vera watched from the shade of their porch, occasionally calling out corrections in her native language. Marcus had begun picking up phrases, the melodic flow of Sarath becoming familiar. It was on the 10th day that their routine was interrupted. Marcus noticed him first, a figure approaching their isolated dwelling with the purposeful stride of someone on a mission. Tall for a Sarath, with pale blue skin marked by elaborate tattoos that indicated high status. His clothing was expensive, his bearing that of someone accustomed to authority. "Minister Jackson," Vera said flatly, rising from her seat. Her hand moved unconsciously toward the weapon at her hip. The man stopped at the edge of their property, his eyes sweeping over the training yard before settling on Marcus with barely concealed disdain. "So the rumors are true. The widow has taken in a human stray." "State your business, Jackson," Vera replied, moving to stand between the minister and her family. Marcus noticed she'd positioned herself strategically, protecting both him and Nico. "I came to discuss your future, Vera. Our future." Jackson's gaze lingered on her with proprietary interest. "You've mourned long enough. It's time to consider practical arrangements. I wasn't aware my morning had a schedule. Don't be difficult. Jackson's tone shifted to one of strained patience. You're a widow of status, I'm an unmated male of equal standing. A union between us would be mutually beneficial. Your son would have a proper father figure, not some human drifter. Marcus felt Nico tense beside him. The boy's hands had curled into fists, his young face twisted with anger. Marcus placed a steadying hand on Nico's shoulder, keeping him from doing something rash. Marcus is teaching me, Nico said, his voice sharp with defiance. He's a better teacher than you'd ever be. Jackson's expression darkened. A child doesn't understand these matters. This human is temporary, Nico. Your mother and I, we could build something lasting. I've already told you no, Jackson. Vera's voice carried the finality of a closing airlock. Multiple times. My answer hasn't changed. Because of him? Jackson gestured dismissively at Marcus. Do you even know who he is? What he's done? Marcus felt ice form in his veins. He'd known this moment would come eventually. The past always caught up. I make it my business to know who enters our settlement, Jackson continued, his smile cruel. Former Lieutenant Marcus Hale of the Terran Defense Corps, discharged for gross negligence resulting in civilian casualties. The Sigma Station incident, wasn't it? 43 dead because of faulty intelligence you failed to verify. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus felt Nico's eyes on him, confusion and hurt beginning to form. Vera had gone very still, her expression unreadable. It's true, Marcus said, his voice rough. No point in denying it. I led a strike team on what we thought was a weapons facility. Intelligence was wrong. It was a refugee shelter. He met Jackson's gaze steadily. 43 civilians died because I trusted bad information and didn't double-check. I was discharged and I deserved it. And you brought this man into your home? Jackson addressed Vera with mock concern. Let him near your son? What kind of mother? Enough! Vera's voice cracked like a whip. You forget yourself, Minister. This is my home, my family. You have no authority here. I have the settlement's best interests at heart. Surely you can see I see a man who's been rejected trying to use any weapon he can find. Vera stepped forward, her posture radiating controlled violence. Marcus told me about Sigma Station the third day he was here. Unlike you, he doesn't hide his mistakes behind politics and manipulation. Marcus blinked in surprise. She'd known? All this time? Jackson's face flushed a darker blue. You're making a mistake, Vera. When you come to your senses, don't expect my offer to still stand. I'll manage to survive the disappointment. Her hand settled on her weapon. Now leave, before I decide you're trespassing. After Jackson departed, his posture rigid with barely suppressed rage, an awkward silence settled over the yard. Nico looked between the adults, his young face troubled. Is it true? He asked Marcus quietly. About the people who died? Marcus knelt to meet the boy at eye level. Yes, I was following orders, but that doesn't excuse it. I should have been more careful. I should have questioned the intelligence. He took a breath. I can't change what happened, Nico. All I can do is try to be better. Try to make sure the mistakes I made don't get repeated. Is that why you're teaching me? Nico's voice was small. To make up for it? No. Marcus found the words came easier than he expected. I'm teaching you because your mother asked me to. Because you deserve to learn. Because... He paused, surprised by the truth of what he was about to say. Because in the short time I've known you both, you've become important to me. More important than I expected. Nico studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Dad used to say that warriors who never make mistakes are either liars or dead. He said what matters is what you do after. Your dad was right. The boy's arms wrapped around Marcus in a sudden, fierce hug. I'm glad you're here, Nico whispered. Even with the mistakes. Over the boy's shoulder, Marcus saw Vera watching them. Her violet eyes were bright with emotion she didn't try to hide. When Nico finally pulled away and ran inside, claiming he needed water, Marcus stood to face her. You knew, he said, about Sigma Station. I researched you the day after you arrived. Vera moved closer, eliminating the distance between them. Did you think I'd let a stranger stay with my son without learning everything I could? And you didn't care? I cared. Her hand reached up, fingertips tracing the line of his jaw. But I also understood. My husband died because of faulty intelligence, too. Because commanders far from the battlefield made decisions based on incomplete information. Her eyes met his. The difference is you owned your mistake. You didn't hide behind orders or politics. That told me more about your character than any official record could. Marcus caught her hand, holding it against his face. Jackson will cause problems. He's the type who doesn't handle rejection well. Let him try. Vera's smile was sharp. I've handled worse threats than a petty bureaucrat. They stood that way for a moment, the space between them charged with something that had been building since that first day. Finally, Vera pulled back, though her fingers lingered in his. Tonight, she said softly, after Nico sleeps, we should talk about what this is becoming. And what is it becoming? Her smile. The alarm pierced the pre-dawn quiet with 3 sharp pulses, followed by a long, wailing tone. Marcus was on his feet before his conscious mind registered the sound. Years of military training overriding everything else. Beside him, Vera moved with equal speed, already reaching for the tactical suit she kept near the bed. Settlement alert, she said, her fingers flying across a holographic display that materialized above her wrist comm. Her expression darkened as she read the incoming data. Kryn scouts detected at the system's edge. Multiple signatures. Marcus felt his blood run cold. How many? At least 6 ships. Maybe more. She was already dressed, weapons appearing from hidden compartments with practiced efficiency. They're moving fast. Estimated arrival in 36 hours. The door burst open and Nico stood there, his young face pale but determined. Mom, I heard the alarm. Is it them? The ones who killed Dad? Vera moved to her son, kneeling to meet his eyes. Yes, sweetheart. But we're going to be ready this time. Her voice was steady, reassuring despite the tension Marcus could see in her shoulders. Go pack your emergency bag, the one we prepared. Stay calm and move quickly. After Nico disappeared into his room, Marcus and Vera faced each other. The intimacy of the previous night seemed distant now, replaced by the cold calculus of survival. The settlement's defenses? Marcus asked. Minimal. We're a civilian outpost, not a military installation. Vera pulled up a tactical map showing Haven's Rest and the surrounding terrain. We have some automated turrets, a shield generator that might buy us a few minutes, but against a full Kryn assault force. She didn't need to finish. Marcus had fought the Kryn during his service. Reptilian, ruthless, and efficient. They didn't take prisoners and they didn't show mercy. Evacuation? He suggested. The nearest safe settlement is 8 days' travel across open desert. We'd never make it before they arrived. Vera's jaw set with determination. Our best chance is to fortify, fight, and hope we can hold long enough for a distress signal to reach the sector patrol. That could take days. I know. Her violet eyes met his. But it's the only option we have. The next 30 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus found himself falling back into the role of soldier, assessing defensive positions and coordinating with the settlement's sparse security force. Despite his past disgrace, the other residents seemed willing to accept his expertise when the alternative was death. Everyone except Jackson. This is your fault, the minister hissed, cornering Marcus near the settlement's main generator. Your presence here drew attention. The Kryn must have been tracking you. The Kryn don't care about individual humans, Marcus replied evenly, though his patience was wearing thin. They're here for resources, territory, maybe revenge for past encounters. But not for me. Then why now? Why attack us after years of peace? Because you're weak and isolated, Vera interjected, appearing beside Marcus. Because the Kryn expand wherever they can. This has nothing to do with Marcus and everything to do with opportunity. She stepped closer to Jackson, her voice dropping to something dangerous. Now either help prepare our defenses or get out of the way. I don't have time for your jealousy. Jackson's face flushed dark blue, but he backed down. As he stormed off, Vera sighed heavily. He'll cause problems, Marcus observed. If we survive, I'll deal with him properly. She checked her weapon's charge. Right now, we have bigger concerns. That evening, as the twin suns painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Marcus found Nico sitting alone on a rocky outcrop overlooking the settlement. The boy was holding something small and metallic, a pendant that caught the dying light. Your father's? Marcus asked, settling beside him. Nico nodded, clutching the pendant tighter. Mom gave it to me this morning. She said to keep it close for luck. His voice wavered. Are we going to die tomorrow? Marcus considered lying, offering empty reassurances. But Nico deserved better than that. I don't know, he said honestly. The Kryn are dangerous and we're outnumbered. But we're not helpless. Your mother is one of the best warriors I've ever seen, and this settlement is full of people who know how to survive. You're scared. It wasn't a question. Nico had gotten good at reading people during their time together. Terrified, Marcus admitted. But fear isn't the enemy, Nico. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you careful. It's only a problem if you let it paralyze you. The boy was quiet for a moment, then looked up at Marcus with eyes far older than his years. If something happens to Mom, will you take care of me? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Nothing's going to happen to your mother. But if it does, promise me. Marcus pulled the boy close, feeling the slight coolness of Serath's skin against his own warmth. I promise. But Nico, your mother is going to be fine. We're all going to be fine. He hoped he wasn't lying. The Kryn arrived with the dawn, their ships cutting through Ashara Prime's atmosphere like blades. No warning shots, no attempts at communication. Just immediate, overwhelming violence. The settlement's shield generator flared to life, absorbing the first barrage of plasma fire. Marcus watched from his position near the eastern defensive line as 6 ships circled overhead like predatory birds. They're testing our defenses, he said into his comm. Looking for weak points, Vera's voice crackled back. Let them look. We've got surprises prepared. The surprises were Marcus's idea. Improvised explosives buried at strategic points around the settlement's perimeter. Not enough to stop the Kryn, but enough to make them think twice about a direct assault. The shield failed after the 3rd barrage, overloaded by sustained fire. Immediately, 2 of the Kryn ships descended, deploying ground troops. Marcus counted at least 30 soldiers in the first wave, their reptilian forms moving with predatory efficiency. All units, hold fire until my mark, Vera commanded. Let them get close. Marcus's finger tightened on his rifle's trigger as the Kryn advanced. 20 meters, 15, 10, now! The settlement erupted with coordinated fire from multiple positions. The first rank of Kryn fell, their armor no match for concentrated plasma bursts. But they adapted quickly, spreading out and using cover more effectively. Detonating Sector 3, Marcus reported, triggering one of his buried explosives. The blast caught a squad of Kryn in the open, scattering them like toys. But for every enemy they dropped, more seemed to appear. The Kryn were nothing if not persistent. Marcus, they're flanking your position. Vera's voice was urgent. Fall back to checkpoint Beta. He saw them then, a group of Kryn moving through the ruins of an abandoned building to his left. If they reached his position, they'd have a clear line to the shelters where the non-combatants, including Nico, were hiding. Marcus made his decision in a heartbeat. Negative. I'm holding here. Marcus, don't... He switched off his comm and focused on the approaching enemy. 8 Kryn against 1 human. He'd faced worse odds before, though usually with a full squad backing him up. The first Kryn came through the doorway fast, and Marcus was faster. 3 shots center mass the alien crumpling. The second tried to use its fallen comrade as cover, but Marcus had already shifted position. 2 more shots. Then they were on him, too close for rifles. Marcus dropped his weapon and drew the combat blade Vera had given him. The next few minutes blurred into a savage dance of close-quarters combat. The Kryn were stronger, their scales providing natural armor, but Marcus was faster and more desperate. A claw raked across his ribs, drawing blood. Marcus ignored the pain, his blade finding the weak point under a Kryn's jaw. Another came at him from the side and he pivoted, using the dying alien's body as a shield. When it was over, Marcus stood alone among 6 Kryn corpses, breathing hard and bleeding from multiple wounds. The remaining 2 had retreated, though whether from fear or to regroup, he couldn't say. Marcus! Vera appeared, her white hair wild and streaked with purple Kryn blood. You reckless stubborn? She stopped, seeing his injuries. Oh, stars. I'm fine, he lied, though the world was starting to tilt alarmingly. The shelters? Safe. You held them. Her hands were on him, assessing damage with clinical efficiency. But you're not fine. You need medical attention. Later, how's the rest of the line? Holding, barely. She helped him to a sitting position against the wall. The Kryn pulled back after losing nearly half their ground forces. Their ships are repositioning. She looked up at the sky, worry etching lines around her eyes. I think they're calling for reinforcements. Marcus followed her gaze and felt his stomach sink. 3 more ships were descending through the atmosphere, larger than the first wave. Cruisers, not scouts. We can't hold against that, he said quietly. No. Vera's hand found his, squeezing tightly. We can't. A small figure burst around the corner, and Marcus's heart stopped. Nico, dirty and terrified but unharmed, threw himself at Marcus. I heard the fighting. I thought... The boy's voice broke. I thought you were dead. Takes more than a few overgrown lizards, Marcus said, managing a smile despite the pain. Over Nico's head, he met Vera's eyes. They both knew what was coming. Then a sound split the air, high and piercing. Not Kryn weapons, but something else. Something human. 3 sleek ships screamed overhead. Their design unmistakably Terran Defense Corps. They engaged the descending Kryn cruisers with precision fire, and the sky erupted into a deadly ballet of advanced warfare. With